Joel, come here, Joel. Joel, come here, girl. Come on, come on, come on, come on. We're part of the solution, and people need to understand that a lot of the expression is it's not the cow, it's the how. So the industrial concentrated animal feeding operations, those things, yes, they have a detriment on the environment. They are a carbon issue. But the type of farming that we're doing is our whole idea is to reduce outside inputs. So we don't want to use fossil fuels, which, you know, most of the synthetics, fertilizers and stuff are derived from fossil fuels. So we want to get rid of that. My name is Michael McGilvray. I'm the owner of Kirkview Farms. We are regenerative organic farmers at Kirkview Farms. We farm this farm, which is our family farm since the late 1700s, early 1800s. We're putting carbon back in the soil. If you feed cattle monoculturally grown crops, for example corn or something like that, there's a carbon footprint to that. But if you're using natural grasslands and creating natural grasslands and rotationally grazing or mob grazing the cattle on it, you're actually putting carbon back in the soil. And then it ends up looking like that, and then it's ready to go on the field. And again, so in the winter, instead of the cattle being out, we capture it all here, but we do put it back on the field, so that's where it comes, you know, it goes back where it came from, which is always the key, right? You have cows that are spreading their manure themselves across the land, so there's no fossil fuels being utilized for that. People have been picking up, you know, the methane aspect or the CO2 aspect, and not understanding that there's not a lot of studies been done on grass-fed beef, right? So understanding what the actual total equation looks like. Hey, come here, sweet pea. Come on, sweetie. Come on. And when you start to look at it, though, the equation is fairly balanced. Like, so you don't have as much of some of that stuff going on, right? Some of the negative aspects that you do get with that concentrated animal feeding operations, a lot of that disappears whenever the animal's out on grass. Replenish the soil bank by, you know, fertilizing it with urine and manure, and basically feeding the soil and building soil in that way too, right? So a lot of these practices are about soil building and soil health. Come on in. Whereas we have to actually work with the land. We use soil tests to determine if there's any deficiencies. We also look for weeds, that thing that people try to kill off all the time, but they're really just an indicator of what's going on in the soil. So they can tell us if there's a deficiency, and if there is a deficiency, then we look at supplementing using minerals or something to rebuild it, and or using animals. You know, sometimes we put chickens in a certain area because we want to increase the nitrogen, because maybe there's a subsequent crop that we're going in that requires a lot of nitrogen. And then we have pigs, which we're continuing to adjust our size of our herd, but it's around about 100 and 180 pigs that we have. And then cattle, we're about 60 head of cattle right now. So, and the idea is to continue to grow that aspect, because that's the carbon sequestration team. So we want that team to be as big as possible. So on the regenerative, a lot of people, you know, they think we don't use any fossil fuels at all. That's not the case. We do use them. We just be very cognizant. We, you know, have to think whenever we go to do something, is there another way to do it? We try to use animals to do as much as possible, but, you know, sometimes it necessitates having a tractor around. So you're taking a leap of faith. You have this land that you're stewarding, and you really, you know, you want to do the right thing, but you need to be able to make a living as well, right? So it's a challenge.
I go Scarlet.
Yeah, Scarlet. There is a negative effect to growing strictly monoculture crops, whether it's for a plant-based or a vegan diet or an animal-based diet. So that you need to have that diversity. So the challenge is understanding that there is an impact. If you're using a plant-based diet, I can take you through the community here and show you where 50 acres at a time are being clear cut off to grow soybeans, which are then taken to Gatineau, Quebec and made into soy milk. We're displacing wildlife. So the effect may not be evident to you. So you may be having an impact on the environment and not realizing it. So you think you're doing the right thing by not eating the animals. It's a different animal that's getting affected by it. Organic peas and oats. It actually comes from Ile-de-Calumet, west of Ottawa, from an organic farmer there. So the one thing is to be a conscious consumer, right? I think that that's the biggest challenge we have today is we have a lot of unconscious consumers. So people are just, and I was one of them. I'm, born and raised on a farm, but was an unconscious consumer, just buying stuff and not realizing where it's coming from and what impact it has, not only on my health, but on, the climate. So this is my wife, Cora. She's referred to as the pig pamperer because she gives all the pigs their love. So we do have several customers that have health issues, and that's one of the reasons they buy our products is because they actually can feel good eating our products. If they eat commercially raised products, they have an issue. So we have a couple like that. But the biggest thing I think is they feel fuller on a smaller portion because of that. Again, that goes back to that density, the nutrient density aspect. And people want to feel good about what they eat, right? So if they know how the animals are raised, they see they have a good life. I think that comes into play as well. That's part of the factor is that they can feel comfortable with what they're eating, right?
I have my sweet little face. I'm so pretty.
The thing about the type of agriculture we do is the consumer is fully burdened with the cost of our production. We are not subsidized. We don't have, we don't have the scale. So they're paying the full cost. Right, Scarlett? If you want to have a local food system, you need to have that ecosystem to be able to, take it from pasture to plate. There's a lot of steps in between. So we need to make sure that we help rebuild that. And one way of doing that is continue to support local farms. That will create the demand and hopefully the investment from people to, expand that processing capability. The other thing we're seeing is climate change is having an impact. The growing seasons are changing, the weather patterns are changing, and so that's going to put an increased pressure on some of this commodity-based growing stuff that there's going to be some real challenges ahead.